Hey, yo, fam, what is going on? It is 2:30 p.m. here on June 27th, 2022. Thanks a lot for tuning back into the Way Too Much JRMC podcast. Had a pretty exciting weekend, just like everyone else from Friday on. Start things off. Daddy over here. I'm legit now, so you can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Podcast, Amazon Music, like always, YouTube, Facebook, all that. So we everywhere. You know what I mean? So it's pretty exciting development there. Appreciate all you guys that have tuned in here early on and listened to what I've had to say and have encouraged me and all that good stuff. But we're trying to do big things here, and just want to thank all y'all right off the bat here. So that was the first piece of exciting stuff going on. Secondly, we probably had like the biggest stretch of 3 days as far as Supreme Court rulings go in the history of the country, possibly, as far as all at once stuff happening, certainly in my lifetime. And so, we're going to dig into all that a little bit here. Just go ahead and give you one update. I don't personally think that my personal opinions and feelings and all that are that novel or anything like that. So I'm going to try to take maybe a slightly different approach than just worrying about what I think and what I wish would have happened and what I'm happy about what happened and all that good stuff. We're going to talk about some procedural items and things like that. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So like I said, big few days as far as Supreme Court rulings go. First of all was the Second Amendment protection case. I think it was New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin or something like that. That case basically was the Supreme Court telling the state of New York that they can't put extra, what they call like good cause justifications on people to give them concealed carries. Okay, so I personally don't see how anybody paints that in a negative light. Because again, and we'll get into this in a second on what the Supreme Court's role is. But it basically just guarantees that Joe Schmo has the same protections under the law and under the Constitution as the rich and famous guy that can certainly prove that his life is more at risk than mine is walking on the street because he's famous and people know who he is and all that. That's number one. Number two, obviously, overturning the Roe versus Wade. My redneck ass probably got no business talking about it, but I'm going to anyway. So, whatevs. If all of us that don't think we're adequate enough to talk about something don't talk about something, then guess what? Only the same people are going to keep talking about everything. So, if we want to get smarter, want to advance our own knowledge base and, become better human beings, we got to talk about things. So that was it's the Dobbs versus Jackson case, and in this one, it's basically the Supreme Court saying, not coming in and saying, hey, we don't support abortion. We think you're a morally corrupt, moral terrible person if you have an abortion. We believe in, Jesus Christ, the stuff that everybody's trying to paint it out as if they're saying. That's like, none of that is what they're saying. They're basically, all they're saying is when this Supreme Court, when this case was originally put to the test back in 70, I think it was 73 or something like that, 72, it was wrong. The Supreme Court back, 50 years ago, literally invented this constitutional right. They said something was in the Constitution that was not in here. Okay, I went through it. There's not one single word about an abortion in here. And so they basically, the ruling was wrong. Initially, they tried to go into the trimester qualifications, all that stuff. That part had already been struck down, I think, in the 90s or something. So they basically just said it was bad. It's bad case law. It's thrown out. It's going back to the states. Okay, so that's two pretty big, possibly the two. I don't know that there's any other cases that could possibly happen in the rest of my lifetime that would be bigger than these two items. So, but again, other than talking about, my personal opinions on the matter, because I think most people can probably figure out about where I stand on things. In our group show, you can see I got ammo cases over between the two, the couch and in the single seat that where Pink normally sits. So you probably know I got guns, and you know I'm a redneck. So I don't know if you can be classified as a redneck if you ain't got some guns in your house. So I obviously support the Second Amendment. As far as Roe versus Wade goes, I mean, I'll be honest. As far as my entire life, I've been back and forth on it and didn't know how I felt about things, and and all that. And, now I have 4 children, so obviously I believe in children, giving children the right, the chance to live. And I think in my younger days I was a little more narcissistic and thought that, I had the right, or the girlfriend had the right, or whatever, and it was their life. I wasn't really willing to think about the fact that there was another life inside of the inside the womb. I'm talking when I was extremely young. It's been a while. But I think the biggest thing here is with this is we don't even have to delve into that. It doesn't matter what you think or what I think or what my church thinks or your church thinks or the church, your lack thereof a church thinks. It doesn't. None of that matters. That's not what the Supreme Court was doing here, and we'll get into this in a second. The Supreme Court was all they were saying was this is not in our purview. It's got to go back to where it belongs, and we're going to talk about where that is that things belong. So let's just start there. And first of all, just remember this, that the point of a judicial system is not to worry about your feelings or my feelings, or whatever type of way we're feeling. Those things don't matter. We have to. It's one thing I'm trying to do to rise above in my adult life is I'm trying to get out of my feels. You know what I mean? Like if there's one thing that people where I'm from that we're guilty of more often than not, is like, man, we fly by the seat of our pants and just live by our emotions. We get pissed off, we end up in a fight, catching a charge. We're like, we have one good date and we think we're all excited. Oh, hell, now we're getting married and having babies, and then we're in a divorce 3 years later. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm depressed now and I'm going to snort some Oxycontin on my nose. I mean, that's people where I'm from got to stop being like that. And I'm trying to stop to not be like that here. And so it's the beauty about the judicial system, and whenever I think about it, is like there's no emotion whatsoever. It just is what it is. At least that's the way it should be. And so I think the Supreme Court has done a good job on these 2 cases as far as those go. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, federalism. Okay, it's that when you hear the word federal, you think national government, U.S. government. It's actually the opposite. So we'll say you got to think in the inverse. We live in a federalist system that basically says the federal government doesn't have a power that isn't specifically given to it. Okay, and if that power isn't specifically given to it, then it's reserved to the states. Right now we have 50 of them. One time we had 13 of them. One time we had 25 of them. So it's like it's reserved to the states that are agreeing to become a union under those agreed upon parameters from a national standpoint. But then they're still there to live freely and govern themselves and their constituents and their citizens, because California citizens are going to be different from Kentucky citizens. So it's a beautiful, system and setup, because that's what you need. You need to keep bare bones. Your federal regulations, laws have to be as bare bones as possible, because the more that's in the federal Constitution, the more likely it is that all 50 of those states are not going to agree on everything. So you can only keep in there what everybody's going to agree upon, and what is like an inalienable right for the federal government to protect everyone from losing, or the states, are the ones that have the power. So the specific thing you got to look for in here, and if you're not aware of, pick up a pocket constitution or something from somewhere, Google it. They're on there for free. You can probably go to the library and get one free if you wanted to, or whatever. You can certainly print one off. But hopefully we all know the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So if the power isn't listed in here in the Constitution, it's left to the states, which means it's left to the people. Okay, so that's all they're saying. So let's dive into these 2 Supreme Court cases here. In the Second Amendment one, because I've heard people say that the Supreme Court is being, they're being schizophrenic here in their decision making, because they're saying, well, they're telling the states they can't have the power to regulate this, but the states do have power to regulate this. And it's like, yes, that's exactly right. And there's one reason why. One. Second Amendment, right to bear arms, is in here. The right to an abortion, it ain't. It's that simple. That's all. That's all those pages long of everything they got in there and all that legal jargony and all that stuff. That's the reason. That's all it was. So again, I just read you the 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. Second Amendment, we're all pretty familiar with this one, is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Boom. You're infringing the right to bear arms if you're telling rich and famous people that they can apply and get a permit, but you're telling poor, working class, rednecks, whites, blacks, Mexicans, like everything, telling all them that you can't get one because you're not important enough. You're infringing on the right to bear arms. So, and the right to bear arms means it doesn't just mean in your house. They're saying it means you have the right to bear arms. Okay. So that's why they ruled that way and said states can't impose extra things on there because it's in here. It's in the Constitution. For those of y'all that are listening, I'm holding up a little blue pocket Constitution. It's about 20 pages long here with the amendments and articles of the Constitution and all that in here. It's in here. All right. As far as abortion goes, I keep hearing them talk about the law of the land. It's been a constitutional right. It's not in the damn Constitution, guys. I don't like to be thinking that I'm like shoving my views down people's throats. Okay, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be one of those people. I want to win the war of ideas, right? I really do believe in that, like through and through. But there's no idea to be won here. The right to an abortion is not a constitutional right. So now the Supreme Court didn't say the states have no right to enact restrictions on abortion or anything. Nothing of the sort. They just said that the federal government doesn't have the right to tell all states they have to allow them to occur inside their borders. They just said it's not in their jurisdiction. So I know it stinks because everybody wants to be lazy and wants everyone else to do everything and doesn't want to go out and win 50 little individual ideological wars. But that's America. That's how things work. So now you're going to get to your state legislatures and lobby for whatever it is you want. If you want abortion to be legal or if you want it to be banned or whatever, that's what you got to win it there. At least it's closer to you now. At least you can drive to your state capital and try to talk to somebody. It's like go to D.C. right now and try to figure out how to get in the building. I know I couldn't. They ain't gonna let me go. Look how crazy I look. They ain't letting me in there. So like, that's really all that happened. So all this other emotional mumbo jumbo and like all this craziness happening through the streets where people are, it's like they're holding up. They got posters and stuff on with people like their legs spread and it's my body, my choice. Like all this crazy. That's not what anybody's talking about. Okay, like that's not what the Supreme Court is doing. This is not this emotional thing. Everybody, the people that are mad about it are holding on tight to it because they know, like deep down, I think the left knew they got one over on everybody back in the 70s whenever they ruled Roe versus Wade. They knew it wasn't right, and that they knew that, and they knew they weren't going to get 50 states to outlaw it. Okay, so they got one over on us, and now that's being corrected, they're freaking out. Okay, and again, another thing that everybody else needs to remember is since 1972, I think let's just say 1972. I'll be a couple years off, whatever. All in that time frame, federal legislators had time to codify Roe versus Wade in legislation through a constitutional amendment, get that in there. Like they had all that time. They didn't do it. There was a whole lot of talk, but no one ever did it because if they ever tried to do it and then didn't get it done or whatever, or did get it done, they'd have to answer to it. So they'd just rather point fingers at everybody. That's basically what was happening in my point of view, and it happens all over the place. One other big thing that I personally want to like really drive home and feel like this is if I had one serious glaring deficiency in my politics and my opinions and all that, and like this is why once I started going to Frankfort, Kentucky, and trying to make an impact on the legislation and everything, I eventually took a step back and wasn't as mad at all the reps and stuff as I expected myself to be. I was more embarrassed and ashamed of myself because I realized, like, oh my goodness, I don't know anything about what a magistrate does, or as city councilman, or a county clerk, or like the difference between like state laws and federal laws, and federal courts and state courts. I didn't know any of those things, and so I realized I was one of these people that was presenting a whole bunch of problems to people, thinking that anybody and everybody could fix it, but I shouldn't have to. I should just better bring it up to them and they fix it. So I think most of us here, I think most of us, left and right, we up until recently, we thought it was almost as if we elected every single person, we elected every single position as if it was like a blanket position that could do whatever the hell it wanted to do. Okay, so for instance, I kept getting feedback from state legislators when I was trying to get them to take masks off kids, is that we gave that power back to the school boards, local control. One thing I kept saying was, I don't think anybody went to the ballot box to vote for a school board member to be the health Gestapo, to control every small health decision that a student in a public school system has to have. I don't think anybody voted a school board member in for that. And it was like that either snapped them back into reality, like, oh my gosh, he's kind of got a point, or people just double down and they just literally could not deal with thinking about it that way, because in their minds the government like literally has any power it wants once it decides that it wants it. Same thing with like our governor. It was like this idea that we need to pass a law to reassert that a governor, nor state legislature should be able to tell anyone whether or not they can go to church. I don't think anybody elected anyone into there under the assumptions that, okay, well, when times get tough, when there's a bad flu season rolls around or whatever, I'm voting this person in so they can tell everybody not to go to church. I trust them to do that. I don't think anybody voted anybody in to do that. Okay, but for whatever reason, here recently, maybe it's a recent thing or something, like it's like we think we vote the president in there and they can literally do whatever they want and there's no parameters, right? Like they can ban whatever product they don't like, or they can executive order this amount of money, or they can stop CRT from getting talked about in schools, or they can whatever that said person's issue is. We think they should be able to stop it, whether through a vote in the legislature or through executive order or whatever. And I'm like, that's a monarchy, that's authoritarian rule. That's somewhere where you don't have, where you as an individual don't have a playbook. You're just taking whatever rules they're giving you and living your life. That's not, luckily for us, that's not the country we live in. We have a playbook and we've all just forgotten about it. I started sitting down and thinking about, my own civics lessons growing up. And luckily for me, I had a wonderful, my favorite teacher all growing up was my 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I held back in 8th grade. So I had 2 8th grade years. My social studies teacher at Pineville Elementary, her name's Miss Givens. So Miss Givens, what's going on? It's I miss you, and I still think about you all the time whenever I'm thinking about my educational background. But we talked a lot about the Supreme Court checks and balances, and we talked about the executive branch and legislative branch and how bills become a law, and we all watched the little cartoon videos and all that. But even then, I've sat back and tried to think real hard. I don't feel like there was a big stressing of all three, those 3 branches of government, all that they matter, but they don't mean anything without this. And for those of y'all that are listening, I'm holding up the Constitution again. Without this blueprint, this this rubric to go by, to base decisions off of, none of those things matter, because then you literally would be just living, flying by the seat of your pants all the time, or whatever judges got in there, whatever they felt, whatever, what have you. That's all that would matter. But luckily for us, we have a constitution, both state and federal, that gives us certain rights as individuals. And yes, this constitution can be changed, it can be amended. That's one of the beautiful aspects of it, is there is a process in there to amend it as society changes and culture changes. And and I'm a firm believer that politics should be downstream from culture. It shouldn't be culture's downstream from politics. Culture should drive your politics, right? So that, there are ways to amend your constitution, but the Constitution is what really matters. The Supreme Court without the Constitution doesn't matter. The president without the Constitution doesn't matter. Just the king. Like legislative branch without the Constitution, just the House of Lords, House of Commons. It's it's old school government. This Constitution is what sets us apart from the rest of the world. And yes, we certainly have not lived up to it all on the way. And there's some other amendments in here that I'm telling y'all that, like, people on the left that think right now that I'm beating up on the left, that like I'm just a right wing nut or whatever. Like, there are other amendments in here that I know right now. There's people on the right, or I'm sorry, let's call them rhinos. They're typical Republicans that won't agree with my stance on where I think we're at on some of these other amendments, because I don't think we're living up to them at all. And I think that, like, big government rhinos and the big government left authoritarians are okay with that, because they don't want to live up to some of the stuff. But for instance, let's look at it for this. The amendment, let's think about the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons against unreasonable searches and seizures. Okay, so you're supposed to have a warrant signed by a judge before law enforcement, whatever, can search your premises, your car, any of that stuff. We all know that ain't happening. Okay. So there's all kinds of stuff that right now isn't getting followed through on. And so that's I think that's probably our biggest issue in today's world. And as we go here and we start diving into other topics, over the next little bit here, whether it be education or penal reform or racial issues, that kind of thing, it's really my hope that we can bring all those issues home to the Constitution, to what everyone's rights are, to what the government's role is supposed to be, and how they are either overreaching that authority or taking advantage of it and skewing it, or how we have, as citizens, given the government too much power and need to reconsider what we're allowing there. I mean, whatever it may be. I just don't want this to become a show that's just me opining on my opinions on everything and just getting everybody pissed off and inflaming passions and emotions and all that stuff. I know it's what gets clicks and shares and comments and all that. So, but I don't care. What I want is to drive a rational debate and use that visceral reaction that seeing me and hearing me, looking like a trailer park kid, sounding like one, being loud, obnoxious, all those stereotypes that you would think of someone that looks like me, sounds like me, talks like me, walks like me, like using that as a way to make it that much, like that, driving the point home even more whenever you realize, like, oh my goodness, this dude's he's having like a rational discussion on this, like he's staying cool and calm and admitting when he's wrong and trying to get better and trying to challenge himself and bring people on there that can challenge me and all that stuff. That's really what I hope to be able to do on in the show going forward. So yeah, again, that's kind of the main thing I want to drive home. I know it's a really boring topic. It's not as fun as all the emotion and the my body, my choice, or you're a baby killer. It doesn't matter to me which of those that I agree with or don't agree with or whatever. What matters to me is did these decisions flow consistently with what the founding fathers and the Constitution of the United States says is supposed to happen? And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. Because the Second Amendment is in the Constitution, the Supreme Court of the United States has an obligation to protect every individual citizen's right to bear arms. That is in their purview. On the flip side comes the Roe versus Wade and abortion. Regardless of how any of them feel about abortion, even if they all want it, even if they all thought abortion was great and that they were just killing babies so they could go to heaven sooner and be with the angels, but even if all of them thought that, it still would be the right decision to say it's not in our purview, and the Roe versus Wade decision was an absolutely terrible decision. Because nowhere in this book, the Constitution of the United States, is there any guarantee of a protection to abortion. It's not in here. I'm sorry, everybody. You can be mad at me all you want, but it's just true. It's not in there. Okay, so there's that. Now moving on a little bit. This kind of is a little bit of opinion, talk here, because it is kind of crazy. These two things happened same day, back to back. I just kind of always thought, to me, it seems whenever a decision gets made, it's so hard, especially when you look at the courts, it's so hard to get something reversed. There's this thing called judicial precedent or whatever, which in my opinion is a problem we have in America. Because I feel like basically it's all these judges just chip away until 100 years later they played the secret game in elementary school, and everybody's whispering the secret in somebody's ear, and 20 people down the road, it's a totally different secret than what it was at the beginning. Well, I feel like that's what happens through judicial precedent, because judicial precedent basically means like the opinion of previous judges. So there's that, and so I think it's interesting that happened that quickly. But also, here's why I feel like it did happen the way it did happen. And it's the left. I really hope anyone who's on the left, that's in the left wing, or it's a liberal or whatever, or votes Democrat. This is why I hope you're listening still, because I really think there's times where we have to internalize and look in the mirror. I know, I'm always talking about how I'm a redneck, and I know in the past I've had tendencies to have a short fuse and blow up and have a self-fulfilling prophecy and some tendencies towards self-destruction, all that, self-fulfilling prophecy. Where we're at today is no one's fault other than the left's. They had gotten what they wanted. Roe versus Wade was there. It's really hard to get judges to step on previous judges' toes and say they were wrong. But the left just continued to grind on this abortion topic, to where there are literally people on the left that want to argue that abortion is okay all the way up until that baby comes out of the womb. And because of that, we are where we are now. People in Kentucky and people in Tennessee, and people in Ohio and Michigan and Florida and Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma, Iowa, the Dakotas, these Pennsylvania, those, you're talking about regular Joes. They weren't, and I will include myself in this, we weren't going to stand for that. We were not going to stand for being able to abort babies up until their first breath outside the womb. We weren't. I'm just sorry, guys. But if the left would just remained reasonable and kept, along this lines of until a baby's viable or whatever. I really don't think. I don't think that people on the right would have ever agreed with an abortion, but the Supreme Court themselves would not have done it. I really don't think they would have. And maybe those people that agree with the 40-week, having an abortion at 40 weeks, or maybe it's a very small percentage of people. Thing is, they're very loud. They're very loud, and they make it sound like there's millions and millions of them, right? So that's really what turned the tide. The left turned the tide on themselves because it wasn't enough for them just to have what they wanted. Once Roe versus Wade passed, they should have been like, okay, we're going to keep quiet. Or not passed. That's, again, I'm using the language they want me to use. Nothing passed. They invented the constitutional right. But once that court came down and invented that right for them, my goal would have been like, okay, we're going to keep this crap as quiet as possible because we got what we want, and we don't want anybody to find out that we shouldn't have got it. But no, they didn't just want to have the right themselves. They wanted everyone to have to agree with it. They wanted everyone to have to profess to them that they agree with it, and we weren't going to do it. I think that another thing is they just kept pressing on trying, and this is what the left is very good at, and the right's really good at it too, with their warmongering and trying to spend trillions of dollars every single day on wars and all that. People are starting to wake up to the use of language, like, to our detriment. Like, we are starting to realize that people are using us and our like average Jonas against us, and we're not going to have it again either. Just like with me and Pink when we were talking about the abortion discussion, and I'm going to bring up the definition of abortion here real quick and read it again so that we can talk about what an abortion actually is here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to get the exact. So the dictionary.com definition of abortion is the deliberate termination of a human pregnancy. Oh wait, that's not the one. I need to go to the Brigham Western one. Here we go. So the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the embryo or fetus. So they kept using this term abortion as if that when they talk about the woman's right to choose, or what about a woman whose life is at risk or whatever, they would use those two terms like synonymously, like an abortion and ending a pregnancy to try to save a woman's life were the same thing. We're all waking up, and this is definitely a purpose I hope to serve, is like driving home that definitions do matter. Like, what is on paper does matter. Like, definition of abortion doesn't mean you ended the pregnancy. It means you ended the pregnancy and it immediately resulted in the additional death of the fetus. So you can end pregnancies without deliberately killing the child. And I'll argue on your side against people that think that you shouldn't be able to end a pregnancy to save a woman's life. Like, again, ending a pregnancy isn't an abortion. That's ending a pregnancy. Okay? If the woman's going to die and we have to end that pregnancy, but we try everything possible to keep that child alive, and the child dies anyways, that's terrible circumstances. But we tried to save both lives. Okay. I don't think anyone thinks a mother should just have to die so the child can live. I mean, there are extenuating circumstances there. So again, not trying to ban ending pregnancies, trying to ban abortions, the deliberate killing of a human fetus or a baby. And so, if y'all remember the show back when me and Pink talked about it, Pink was like, I don't think there's a black family and a black person in America that doesn't think we should be trying to save every baby's life possible. And I said, okay, then why do we just have 6 hours worth, of deliberation on this topic? And that was why, because definitions matter, and we had to really drive home in what that definition meant. So there's that. I mean, so again, I just think that the main thing is we got to pay attention to the words, the vocabulary that they use, because it can be used against us. All right. We have to be careful once we have something we want, that we don't go cut off our nose and spite our own face. In this instance, like I'm saying the left did, where they finally got what they wanted, and instead of just like rolling with it and telling people like, hey, if you disagree, I don't think you're a terrible person. It was like, no, if you didn't 100% agree with abortion, they thought they were going to tell you were a racist, misogynist, homophobic, Islamophobic, xenophobic. They kept going at it so hard that people were like, okay, well, listen, I'm not letting you. We're not letting the children run the house here. We're not going to let it happen anymore. And so that'll bring me to probably my last point here, because I'm already running on 36 minutes. In Clarence Thomas's opinion that he issued, he brought up other court cases that he thinks need to be revisited. One of which was the right to gay marriage, the gay marriage court case. I think we're seeing some other stuff happen in society right now that is going to run the same course and could lead to the same outcome as what we're seeing from the abortion. Ever since Roe versus Wade, the feminist movement it ran with everything crazy after that, right? And it became where you couldn't even be they wouldn't even allow you a logical reasoning to be against abortion without calling you all these names. Well, now we're seeing what started out as a gay rights movement that, I'll be honest, I was sympathetic to. Again, I'm not talking about from a moral standpoint or a religious standpoint. I'm talking about a live and let live standpoint. Like, if you love someone of the same sex or whatever, and you want them to get your pension and to share your retirement benefits with them and share a home with them, or whatever, who am I to judge that? I'm not anyone to judge it. But when you go look in here, I don't know that there is anything in here in this Constitution about same-sex marriage. So we go back. Did the Supreme Court, and this is what Clarence Thomas is saying, the Supreme Court, it's not in their purview. It's a state issue. Now, again, I think right now where we're at, people are okay with where we stand right now. But as things develop and we start seeing more and more of this gender ideology stuff getting put in our schools, these pornographic, obscene material, books and stuff put in elementary school curriculums and libraries, as they add extra letters to the LGBTQ plus minus whatever, as they add more people to that alphabet, and it becomes more and more outrageous to normal life. You're going to start, I think you'll start seeing it's going to be becoming more and more likely that those decisions do get revisited, because they're not going to keep putting up with it. Because the justices like Clarence Thomas, they know that it's an affront to what's in here. They know it's outside the federal Supreme Court's jurisdiction. Okay, they know that. He knows that. And again, that has nothing to do with if I agree with you being able to be married as a gay couple. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with this. And whether or not the federal government's in their purview or not. That's all it is. But, as I don't know if y'all saw What is a Woman, that was put out by the Daily Wire. Everybody knows I'm involved in the education side of things a little bit and doing research there and seeing these books and the stuff they're wanting to talk about with kids. Those things are going to have implications, and it will. I just want to say it. It's June 2022. I want the left to know it will be your fault if those other if those other cases are overturned, and it will be because you just kept grinding into people. You just kept grinding into them, and it's not how it's supposed to work. All right, so again, sometimes you got to take a win. Take a win, go to the house. Like, you can't keep telling people they're terrible, awful, no good people that are just, that don't have a right to live, you know. So there's that, and then this will be my final point, promise, but I almost forgot about this. The other thing I will say is we hear a lot about compromise. You know, I feel like it's a word I've come to really dislike when it comes to politics, because there are certain issues that I feel like compromise is, if you're always going to compromise, then you're always going to only be going in one direction, right? Because you have principled people here, and then people that disagree with you here, and they just keep, if they're here and you're here and you compromise with, and you're here, okay, well then later on you have the same discussion, you're here, they're here, you end up here, so you just keep moving further to the left. But that's where the founding fathers were kind of genius, because there's a constant compromise that's happening. And that compromise is, we have this agreed upon set of beliefs in this Constitution. If it's in here, we're going to protect the people, you know, from it. And as things change, and as we realize that it is terrible that we're allowing other humans to own other humans as property, we will update it accordingly, and then we will all live by those standards. And if you want to push back on it or whatever, you know, we'll go to war, and then the winners will prevail, and then we'll move forward after that. You know, like, begin. It was this constitutional amendment that ended slavery. It was amending the Constitution, right? But that's what you got to amend. You got to amend it, and we did. But in instances that we don't, the compromise is this: we are a nation made up of smaller states. That basically become a marketplace. So the compromise is this: we're going to give you as many states as we have. That's how many options you have to find the place that most closely aligns with your values. I don't want the left or the right being able to force all 350 million people in this country to live under the same factors and guidelines and rules and all that. And so, coming from a side, you know, that we're, let's say on the right side, that think that having an abortion is the murdering of a child. So when those people that think that are saying, I'm not trying to say that it's banned everywhere. I'm just saying that I'm not going to let you tell all 300 million of us that we have to accept it. I at least want the opportunity to find somewhere to live somewhere where in my backyard it isn't happening underneath my nose. That's again, if you think murdering a child, if you think that having an abortion is murdering a child, but you're still willing to let people in California govern themselves, that is a compromise. I don't know what else you could want from people other than just like wanting to force them to believe the way you believe. So that is a compromise. What isn't a compromise is the federal government coming in and telling you that you can't smoke that you can't use vaping products that have the logo JUUL Juul on it. Okay, that's not compromise. That is authoritarianism. Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, it's authoritarianism. So that's not what we want. The compromise is a nation made up of sister states with their own individual constitutions and the right to govern themselves under the framework that they don't violate anything in this small book. That is the compromise that we all live in. And if there's ever a situation where we think, hey, we think the majority of people agree with us, and we have evolved to an extent to where we don't think that the majority of people want the option of owning other people, because it's absolutely, like, it's an embarrassing mark on our history. Then you put it to a vote, and there's processes in here to get it added in the Constitution, and we did it. It's not always pretty. Go watch Lincoln, the one with I can't remember what the guy's name is that's in it. Came in about 10 years ago. It was an ugly process that, in a way, the way that he got that thing passed, but he got it. Okay, so it's ugly. The process is ugly sometimes. It takes time. But again, politics should be downstream from culture, not culture being downstream from politics. So the culture, it became unacceptable enough of owning other human beings that enough people were willing to add it in and vote for it to amend the Constitution. So the Founding Fathers gave us that framework, a way to compromise, and they gave us a game plan, a rubric, to where we can take emotions out of it and just say, okay, let's apply it to this book, and let's see if it's in our federal guidelines, if it's in our federal rule book here. If it's not, kick it back out to the states. Let them do what they want to do. Let the people, rally and lobby their own, elected representatives. And then at that point, let decide. They have to decide if it's allowable in their state constitution. Because just because you're asking the government to do something doesn't mean that they have the right to do it. Okay, so again, I'm gonna get on my soapbox. It's been 45 minutes. Apologize for going a little longer. Definitely longer than I wanted to go here. Again, some things for everybody to read up on: federalism, the 10th Amendment. Okay, the role of the Supreme Court, whether or not they are the branch of government that creates laws or not. Hint, they're not. They decide if it's constitutional or if it's allowed under the Constitution itself already. These are all topics that we have to have something that we're all basing things off of, or it's impossible for the left and the right to ever come to any kind of understanding. Because if we're not playing by the same rules, there is no game. If you got a piece of paper out with the Yahtzee, planning on rolling 5 dice, 3 times, and someone else has got their Monopoly bank out so they can buy properties, and you sit down to play that game, it ain't gonna work because it's different games. The rules ain't the same. So the Constitution is that's our rule book. Okay. I really appreciate y'all listening. Again, I hope I didn't make too many people pissed off, but I don't see how anybody could be mad. I'm not even talking about opinions or anything here. So again, thanks for listening to the Way Too Much JRMC podcast. You can find me now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, pretty much anywhere. But if you do listen to this, I'd absolutely love it if you'd share it. I mean, if you could share this thing, that's the most important thing right now, is that people could share it around and let people see it. Comment, like the videos, but comments would be wonderful. I just love to hear what people had to think, what people had to say. Constructive criticism, critical criticism, pros, cons, positive, negatives. Like, if you think my voice is the worst thing since sliced bread, tell me. I'm okay with that. Again, just a normal person trying to have normal conversations and make it okay to have those normal conversations. Hopefully Pink and I will have a show coming up here one day this week. If not, I'll get back on here solo and talk to you a little more. So again, thanks a lot for listening, and y'all have a great rest of your week. Thanks a lot.